Before we kick things off, allow me to quickly introduce CAS for any of you who may not be familiar with us. We're the world's leading scientific information partner. We've been structuring the science and driving insights for research for 119 years. That spans the depth and breadth of the literature in chemistry, life sciences, materials, and more, powering intellectual property workflows, research workflows, and the day-to-day difficult work in the sciences. Now, before I say anything else, I'd like to get a little pulse on who's in the room with us today. You should see a poll pop up on your screen. One quick question. Is your team using AI for patent search today? We're going to spend time diving into this topic, and I want to hear more about where you all sit in your journeys. I'll come back to these results in a moment, so please go ahead and get your responses in. So while that comes in, let me just set up a little bit of why we're doing this session today. Almost every research organization that I talk to is piloting AI somewhere in their workflow, and patent search and other things related to sort of the structure and governance of research tend to come up pretty early. It makes sense on the surface. Patent search in particular looks a lot like a retrieval problem. And retrieval is something that AI tools handle very well today. In our experience, though, patent literature is one of the least forgiving places that you can point a general purpose AI tool. And there are a few reasons why. In particular, patents are written to claim as much ground as the law allows while disclosing as little as possible. A compound can show up as a Marcuse structure covering millions of compounds, or simply as the compound in Formula One, and never be named in a systematic way at all. The same molecule can be described in 5 different ways across 5 different filings in different jurisdictions, some of them in translation from multiple languages. It's a body of literature where the language is really a legal instrument rather than a research communication tool, as it is in scholarly literature. And it's scientific records second, and really tries not to serve some of the same purposes that other parts of the literature do. There's also a completeness challenge. A substantial amount of chemistry appears in patents before it appears anywhere else, and a lot of it never appears anywhere else. So if your search is covering journal literature and stops there, you're not seeing all of the great and important science that's being disclosed around the world. Then finally, there's an asymmetry as we see in most scientific or in many AI use cases. In many applications, when a model gives you a bad answer, you can tell. You can sort of read through and get a sense and understand that there might be something missing or something incorrect. In patent work, that failure is quiet and malicious. The reference that isn't there in the search result set is often the very most important thing, and creates significant not just challenge and complexity, but also real dollar impact for businesses who miss those findings. So bringing AI into patent search is an exciting proposition and also a challenging one. And I'm excited for our panelists to dive in a little bit more today. So let's take a look at where we all landed on the poll. Christy, I don't know if this can appear on folks' screens or not. For those who, whether or not you can see it, I'll just read the poll results here. So we've got a nice split. 37% of you are using AI in patent search today. About the same percentage, 31%, not yet. Piloting or evaluating and not sure are also about equally split. So good mix across the board of folks who are using it intentionally, folks who are still at the early stages of trying, and folks who are still kind of figuring it out. So I'm excited for our panelists to be able to dive in more in this area. For those of you who are trying, maybe help shape ways that you might think differently about your approaches. And for those of you who haven't yet tried, hopefully get you excited to think about how AI may fit in with your patent search workflows. So allow me to do some quick introductions of our expert panel today. Matt McBride is Director of IP Services here at CAS. His team does patent search and analysis for clients every day, and he'll start us off this morning with why patent searching is hard before AI enters the picture at all, including the fact that much of the data was originally structured for a totally different purpose than the one we're asking it to serve. Brian Habersberger is lead Gen AI engineer for CAS Connections and CAS IP Finder. Brian is an expert in both the IP and the science and builds these systems. And he'll take this one layer deeper to dive into what it is about the patent literature specifically that breaks when we think about general purpose tools. And then Kavita is lead scientist for life sciences at CAS, and she recently led a pharma patent landscape analysis that covers more than 368,000 filings across 90 patent offices. She'll show us a little bit more about what becomes visible at that scale that you simply can't see when you're looking one document at a time. So Matt, without further ado, I will turn it over to you.
All right, so Andrew, as you mentioned, like why are patents so hard? Why are they so difficult? Because it is kind of paradoxical, right? Patents are publicly available, right? Everywhere, easily accessible, so many places to search patents. They're public, they're searchable, so what makes them hard? What makes them hard is I think some of the work that other colleagues at CS have shared before is that patents are in great volume, they're extremely dense, and there is a diversity of ways, as you mentioned, Andrea, of disclosing information. So as public documents, they're very structured, but the information within it can be buried, very difficult sometimes to decipher, particularly in the sciences where, as you said, Andrea, chemistry can be disclosed multitude of ways as a drawn structure, as multiple various names, can be in a table, could be an INCHI, could be a SMILES. There could be disconnects from it. Descriptions of particular substituents could be buried elsewhere in the document where you have to go look it up. So the challenge isn't that they're available. The challenge is really finding what is of interest and not bringing too much along the way that is invaluable. So I got to put here in the bullet point too, what the challenge for searching is trying to anticipate the multitude of ways that what you're looking for can be described, how it may be disclosed, to feel confident that you find every way that something could be described. So anticipation is one of the ways that not to reduce down the work of intellectual property, but anticipating how something might be out there, not knowing, is the challenge of itself. That's the real difficulty. You're not always certain every way that it can be described. And when you add in the complexity of language and ever-evolving science, it just makes it more difficult. So the searcher will use everything at their disposal. The common indexing that's available in patents, from the document itself to classifications, to the proprietary indexing and databases that extract concepts, chemical substance, sequence information, and so forth. So that's really where the difficulty lives, in my opinion, living with my team for the last 16 years. So I pulled up one example that's not chemistry, because I like this example. This is one that pulled up during the COVID times, looking at RNA interference. And I like this claim from this PCT application because it kind of exemplifies a real unique challenge in double-stranded RNA searching. Normally, you'd be looking at double-stranded RNA, and you'd see nucleotides that fit your understanding of what might be present there. But this claim is specifically looking at something that's difficult to see. It's looking at repeated patterns of modifications on nucleotides without mentioning the nucleotides at all. It simply says we're looking at independently representing motifs of 3 identical modifications on 3 consecutive nucleotides. Really kind of complex. If your aim as a searcher were to go in and identify patents that had repeating patterns of specific modifications without actually disclosing the sequence, not an easy task at hand. Again, you may be able to go in and do a broad classification-based search and then try to mine those claims, like visually look at them, apply some technology that might be available to you today if you have databases that pull chemical modification of sequences out into some structured format? Or as we hear from some of the others on the panel, is this a place where AI can help the searcher become more efficient, not replace their role, but help them identify and maybe get to the more valuable content earlier? So anticipation, again, of knowing how something might be disclosed is the critical factor. You don't know in advance until you see it. So again, the idea that an invention can be described in multiple ways. Just like with people, just like with any object, they can be described multiple ways by multiple people. The real challenge with patents is the intention is to kind of make it difficult to see what's there, but disclosing it so that you grant yourself the right to exclude others for a defined period of time. So in the world of chemistry, we can either have, again, an exemplified structure clearly drawn and described that can be extracted either by a human, by a machine algorithm, and so forth, or we can have claims that are very broad and much more difficult, particularly Marcuse structures that add a significant amount of complexity for a person to be able to look at and see what's present in that. So that variability, even just within one document, as you multiply it across the volume of information that CS has reported continues to grow at a fast pace across millions of documents, across filings, across other countries, part of the family, across the languages that are out there. It's far more difficult than any person can do on their own. And today, the professional searcher leverages, again, indexing present within patent filings, with proprietary indexing from many database vendors, and the technology of the search tools they have today, which is where AI fits in, I think, as Brian's going to speak about in a minute. So there is no way to predict every possible way that's wording. There is no way to be 100% confident in the work that you do. The searcher constantly has to balance the science of what they do with this unknown of how far do you cast your net, right? How wide do you balance this concept of recall and precision so that you feel confident knowing there's probably something out there that you missed, but it would be incredibly difficult with a point of diminishing returns for anyone to find. So I'll end on this before I hand it over to Brian, is really the concept of what I think of as the human balancing act, right? The trade-off as a scientist, as a searcher, between finding everything and staying manageable, that you can actually get it done within the time allowed. Again, cutting out the noise is wonderful, but without any noise, you're pretty confident you're missing something. If you retrieve 100 patent citations and they are all on target and there's not a single noise that's in there, most searchers would say, I know I'm missing something. But again, that balance is required because there's a time factor. You have to have address the purpose of the search and try to complete it within a defined time. We don't have an endless amount of time to do the work. So there is no universal setting that works for every project. And any tool that can help the searcher reduce that noise while still maintaining a high degree of precision is what they're searching for. So that balance today is a great degree of human judgment to assess results, modify the strategy, review new results, modify the strategy, continue to balance against the criteria of a search. So that's kind of the challenge, to kind of set the tone for, I think, Brian's great discussion next on the use of AI. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Brian Berger, who's our lead engineer in a lot of CAS AI work. Brian.
Great, thanks, Matt, and good morning, everyone. So following on Matt's discussion, which was why patents are hard in general, or maybe in parentheses for people, I want to talk a little bit about the AI challenges in this space. Starting with, probably a well-known story at this point. When ChatGPT first launched back in late 2022, I think it was, to a lot of people, an interesting toy. It was neat. Computers can do things we didn't realize they could do. But it wasn't long before people began to use them in professional workflows. And one of the first signals of that was legal issues, where an AI like ChatGPT hallucinated, just completely made up some evidence or some case law or something like that. And this showed up in court records. And that is still happening today. So the AI tools have professionalized. They have a lot more utility now. They have a lot more capability. They have domain-specific knowledge and resources like legal, but yet this is still happening. So just starting with a cautionary tale here of a patent-related case in which some AI tool hallucinated some references from earlier this year. So starting with that to make sure that we're on the same page, that AI can be used incorrectly in these spaces, and these challenges play into that. You might have heard the term context engineering in the AI space, and what this means is that we want to make sure that the AI is getting good information. And I like this sort of tidy desk or untidy desk, cluttered desk analogy. When you're using an AI, sort of ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, any of these, Copilot, it generally has retrieval tools. So it can go out into the world or someplace and pull in different documents that may be relevant. And one approach would be to, I'm just going to do a text search. Essentially, I'm going to use a Google search or something like that and pull in all the documents that have relevant text to whatever patent case I'm interested in. And the danger of that is pretty evident. There's so many documents, as Matt was just talking about, and they're very dense, and some parts of them are superficially relevant to your search. So if you're working in the chemical or materials or pharmaceutical spaces, I'm sure you've seen patents that have 37 pages of optional additives, very little bearing on the examples or the claims of the patent. They're just mentioning lots of things as fallback positions or caveats. And very quickly, the AI's context, which is kind of how big its desk is, can be filled up with relatively irrelevant information, which means that important critical information that you'd like to be there can't fit, as well as the AI is somewhat distracted by all of this noise. So on the right is sort of a context engineered workflow where we have indexed data that have been carefully curated. We're trying to put the most important, relevant information into the AI's context, represented by this tidy desk. Another issue that we should think about is that AI search can be really powerful. I'm sure most people here at this point have used an AI tool and just asked it to search for something, help me find a recipe or help me settle this argument I had with a friend about something. But I want to frame the kind of questions it's good at and the kind of questions it's not good at in this concentrated dilute access. So there's a certain class of question you could ask, like, who was the King of France in 1736? And imagining that you have a library that's indexed by country and century for world history, well, you know right where to go. There's probably one document that can tell you exactly who was the King of France in 1736. But on the same document corpus, if you ask a question like which countries have had a female head of state, you have to read every document. There's no way around it. Maybe there's a weird decade where there was a queen regent that you wanted to catch, and you actually have to just go in and look at every single document. So AI is very likely to fail in the second case for the reason I just mentioned. You can't put every document in there necessarily, and there's going to be lots of irrelevant noise. IP questions are very often more like this dilute example, and transitioning to a technical grounding of this. What's the boiling point of acetonitrile? Okay, I'll look that up in my chemical handbook. I know how to find that. Which catalysts achieved, greater than 90% selectivity for CO2 to methanol conversion? Okay, I have to look at a lot of documents to find that. And the other thing I want to add is that the question itself isn't always evidence of whether you have this sort of concentrated versus dilute situation. If you want to go into the lab and practice a reaction that has a certain selectivity, then yeah, the top 1 to 5 documents will do. But if you're scoping an invention, you need to find all of it. You need to find everything that could have a bearing on whether or not you have novelty or an inventiveness behind your invention. So you actually have to go much deeper. Another question that comes up, and Matt touched on it, is the type of language that may be used in a patent and whether it is reflective of general purpose language and is clearly understandable, or whether it's somewhat obscure and somewhat technical, but in a very strange and legal way. So here I have an example. Prior to my role at CAS, I worked for around a decade in photovoltaic application. And I have an interesting example, and I suspect that many folks on the call who have worked in IP for a while could find similar examples. But here I've asked an AI assistant, in the context of patents describing material solutions, what does TPO mean? And the agent comes back and says, okay, yeah, I know what that is. Thermoplastic polyolefin. That's going to be probably polypropylene. It might be blended with some other elastomer materials. It's going to have fillers in it. It's used in automotive parts. It's used in roofing membranes. And this is almost certainly the intended meaning. So very confident. And we talked a little bit earlier about hallucinations. This is like where the AI is confidently incorrect. Here, the problem is that the AI is confidently correct, But there is a narrow slice of patent literature where the term has an entirely different meaning. So in this PV application I was working on encapsulants. So the PV module, which you've seen on rooftops or out in fields, is glass. And then the cells are in the middle and there's glass on the back, but the cells are embedded between two sheets of a clear rubber material called the encapsulant. And this is a pretty large material class that's growing quite rapidly. So this is a $10 billion per year market with a high growth rate. And some of the materials used in this area are ethylene vinyl acetate, polyolefin elastomer, and there's a class of materials called TPO. Okay, well, the AI just told me what TPO means. But wait a minute. In this context, in this little slice, this little corner of the patent literature, it means something completely different. It's not polypropylene. It's an ethylene copolymer. And it's typically functionalized with a silane. It has no fillers. And despite the name thermoplastic polyolefin, it's not a thermoplastic. It's cross-linked. Nevertheless, this is the language you'll find in these patents, right? So if you trust the generalist of the AI who tells you what this terminology means, and it does, in fact, mean that more broadly, in this slice of literature, it's completely the wrong answer. Some patent language isn't language. Or isn't natural language. Chemistry has a very difficult relationship with natural language, and so do many other domains. So sequences in the biological domains. But here, focusing on something that Matt mentioned of a Marcouche claim, so a composition comprising a substance according to a formula with an R1, R2, R3, and in fact, this one, in the grand scheme of Marcouche structures, is relatively simple, but it is a difficult thing for a native AI to work with. Looking at this, you might say, okay, I understand this, and I would like to search for additional substances that are similar to this. Maybe I'm examining this patent for patentability. Well, you can drag an image into your favorite AI tool, and it does, usually they have some ability to view those images, but they don't have any ability to act in the domain of structure, to execute a structure search natively without being provisioned with tools that allow them to do that kind of thing. So their ability to search for something similar would be stuck in the domain of, oh, there's a carbonyl and there's an amine, right? Looking for little fragments of words in proximity, which you may be familiar with, is an extremely difficult way to search for chemical structures. So how can we solve all these various issues with AI and the patent searching, and especially in the chemistry and sequence-specific searching domains? Really, this intersection of the AI's abilities. What is the AI good at? It's good at general reasoning. It's good at doing that at a very large scale compared to a person. But the person has the subject matter expertise. The person knows that, oh, TPO actually means something a little bit different over here. The person has the business context. The person has the strategy, has all these other things to bring to it. And of course, most of the IP search professionals are already using highly indexed data. So we can allow the human to do what the human is exceptionally good at. We can allow the AI to scale that, and we combine that with the indexing to allow it to do this fluently over very large volumes of data. And I think this is where we transition to Kavita.
Thanks, Brian. Hello, everyone. My name is Kavita. For my part of the webinar, I will be presenting a few key findings from a recent report that we published. For this report, we looked at more than 350,000 recent pharmaceutical patents. And one clear signal that emerges from all of this data is unprecedented diversification across therapeutic modalities, molecular targets, as well as disease areas. Now, before I jump into the findings themselves, I want to briefly, talk about the methodology. The first and probably most important part of this analysis was to accurately, identify those relevant pharmaceutical patents that we needed to analyze. And to do so, subject matter experts at CAS crafted a search query, which could pick up all the relevant documents while keeping the noise levels to a minimum. These documents were published between 2020 and 2025. These are patents which have been filed across patent offices, more than 100 of them. In addition, these patents have been fully curated by analysts at CAS, And in addition to these patent documents, like the bibliographic information, title, abstract claims, we also extracted CAS curated information, including CAS indexed concepts, which in this case was about 85,000 distinct concepts for this data set. We also extracted information related to substances that are associated with these patents, and it was about 7.6 million substances. Now, once we had all of this large corpus of data, the next step was to use advanced data analytics, including natural language processing, in order to identify emerging trends and emerging topics across a wide area. The final step of this entire analysis pipeline was to present all of this data in the form of easy to read figures that would be useful to the reader. So I think I mentioned this, but we analyzed more than 350,000 patents. And what our analysis did was identify more than 850 emerging topics in therapeutic modalities, more than 2,000 emerging molecular targets, and more than 1,700 emerging topics in disease areas. And all these three colored hexagons, they have their own story. But for the purposes of today's presentation, I'm only showing a fraction of it, and I'm going to focus on therapeutic modalities. Before I dive into what our analysis indicated, I do want to give a brief overview, right? So the tree map in A, it shows the patent family counts for the various therapeutic modalities. And one clear observation that emerges is that small molecules dominate. This is expected considering the advantages that are associated with small molecules like oral bioavailability, the fact that they're easy to manufacture, and that there's a lot of, scientific knowledge that already exists about them. But if you look at panel B, a different story emerges in that other therapeutic modalities like RNA, antibody, cell and gene therapy, these have a smaller number of patents associated with them as compared to small molecules, but they're outpacing small molecules in terms of growth. Similarly, other therapeutic modalities, including AI and ML in drug discovery, or microbiome-based therapeutics or radiopharmaceuticals, have low absolute number of patents, but they are accelerating fast, and they are likely to be increasingly important in the future. In panel C, you can see the relative contribution of corporate enterprises and research and academic organizations in terms of patent filing. And across most of the modalities, corporate enterprises contribute about 60 to 70%. The exception being RNA, which has a more or less equal contribution by both. This kind of information has implications in licensing and partnership opportunities. So this is an example of a CAS trendscape map. So for this project, we created more than 25 of these maps focused on different areas and different branches of each topic. This one in particular is focused on targeted protein degraders. Now, these CAS trendscape map are highly intricate visualizations of a large amount of data, where we show the hierarchical relationship between different emerging topics and encode two important metrics. One is the number of patents associated with them, which is shown by the size of the hexagon in this case. So larger the hexagon, more number of patents associated, and how fast these patents are increasing, right? That's denoted by the color. So warmer colors, reds and oranges, indicate faster growth, whereas cooler colors like blues and purples indicate more moderate or sedate growth. Before I dive into the map, I do want to call out an important landmark that happened this year, which was in May, the US FDA approved Arvinas's Vepenu, which is the first approved PROTAC worldwide. And this is a very encouraging step in the right direction because it basically validates PROTACs as viable drug classes, right? And what are PROTACs? Well, PROTACs are proteolysis targeting chimeras. So these are heterobifunctional molecules, and they consist of three important components. One is the targeting ligand, which binds to the protein of interest. The other is the E3 ligase recruiter, which binds to the E3 ligase, and the linker that joins both of these. What the PROTAC does is binds to the protein of interest and brings it physically closer to the E3 ligase, which then ubiquitinates the protein. And this signals to the body that that protein molecule has to be destroyed or degraded, after which the PROTAC is recycled and can go ahead and, attach to another protein and cause that one to be degraded. So our patent analysis indicates that among the different types of targeted protein degraders, PROTACs continue to garner significant patenting activity. And within PROTACs, this activity is concentrated around the two major components, which is the E3 ligase binding component and the linkers. This is to be expected because these are the components that are important and they determine the PROTAC selectivity, efficacy, and the clinical outcome. I do want to point out that linkers not only, appear as an emerging topic in terms of PROTACs, but they also show up for antibody drug conjugates. So linkers have become an important part of the drug discovery pipeline across different modalities. Now, besides PROTACs, other protein degrader modalities, including molecular glues and LITACs, are also gaining, significant attention. LITACs are important because they can degrade extracellular and membrane-bound protein, which is not possible for PROTACs. There are two ways you can look at this map. If you're interested in finding areas of white space, like areas where patent saturation is low, then you can look out for those small, brightly colored hexagons. Whereas if you're interested in finding areas that are not as risky and have a decent number of patents associated with them, you can try to look out for the topic with like medium-sized hexagon, which are colored anywhere between green to bluish. I also want to call out that while PROTACs started off, usually people were targeting androgen and estrogen receptors, but increasingly patent activity indicates that PROTACs are being explored for other targets, including kinases. Not only did we create these elaborate CAS trendscape maps that looked at each and every component of the different areas, we also looked at the patent portfolios of a few leading patent assignees, right? And what we observed was that while small molecules dominate the patent portfolios for most of these companies, there is increasingly a diversification beyond these small molecules. And that's what is interesting. So for companies like Bristol Myers Squibb, AstraZeneca, Eli Lilly, besides small molecules, they also appear to be patenting, heavily across other modalities like RNA therapeutics, cell and gene therapies, and antibody therapeutics. Similarly, Regeneron Pharmaceutical, which has historically been an antibody-first company, is also patenting across other modalities increasingly. As I wind up my part of the talk, I do want to encourage the attendees to check out the full report. What I have shown you here today is a very small slice of what we have published in the report. And we have also recently published an interactive version of the map, specifically for the therapeutic modalities. So I would encourage you guys to check it out. It allows you to look at each and every branch yourself and to actually discover what's going on. I think with that, I'm handing it back over to Brian.
Yeah, thanks so much, Kavita. So the three of you have each introduced really important parts of the challenge. What's hard in IP, what's hard about applying AI in IP searching, and what kinds of insights can we get when we know how to connect the information effectively. Brian's going to help tie it together with a little bit about our CAS approach to using AI for patent search.
So the CAS approach, making AI work for science. Really, all of this is built upon a foundation of trusted content. So if you've been familiar with CAS products like SciFinder, IPFinder, STN for years, you're aware of the domain-specific content that is available there. Substance indexing, role indexing, identity semantics, and everything is built on top of that. On top of that, we have specialized tools and capabilities. So if you're a synthetic chemist, you may want some strategy to help you create some specific molecules. We have retrosynthesis tools in that case, bioactivity prediction, and so on. And then much more recently, on top of that, and the main topic today, adding science smart AI, having an AI that can fluently navigate that trusted content foundation and contextually utilize these specialized tools and capabilities where they may be relevant. So I want to have a brief walkthrough of an example session from the CAS Newton for CAS IP Finder. So this is the agentic experience within the IP Finder or STN, excuse me, IP search tool that you may be familiar with, but really giving it a different perspective on what you may have seen from that service previously. So here in this example, I'm doing a landscaping type of query, and I'm just communicating with the agent in natural language. I want to use CPC codes to analyze some patents related to data science and machine learning assigned to chemical and materials manufacturers since 2010. Keep the scope broad, not too tightly constrained on what I mean by data science, and I want you to kind of come back to me with a strategy before we get going. And here I'm using natural language, and I'm an English native speaker, but of course, one of the other powers of AI is that you could do this in the language of your choice, and the AI will fluently speak with you in that language while using the capabilities of the search and indexing systems as well. So here the AI has come back and said, okay, here are some CPC codes that you might learn in this space, and abbreviating that, just giving it the go-ahead, yes, I think I want you to use this particular database, CA+. And there was a list of entities in there. I said, well, add Sabic and ExxonMobil to the list and proceed with the search and analysis. In Newton for IP Finder, you will see this kind of dual panel view where on the left, we see the chat with the agent, and on the right, we see the conventional STN terminal. So the agent is actually issuing these commands into the STN terminal to do search and display operations. So here highlighting that you can click on any of these commands that the agent has executed to jump to the same position. This makes the agent totally transparent and verifiable. So you can see exactly which commands that it issued, and you can even interrupt it and say, hey, I think you should add these search terms. So it's totally transparent, whereas I think many AIs sort of have this black box. It's doing some searching sort of in a secret room, and it comes back to you with results, but you don't really know exactly what it did. And then finally coming back to us with this final report of an analysis summary saying, okay, I found that there are these companies working on these patents, breaking it down by code, breaking it down by timeline, breaking it down by the different aspects of those codes that may be relevant to the user's query. So just a quick look at this product offering that we have in the AI for patent search space before we pivot on to our Q&A panel.
Thanks so much, Brian. That's great. And there's a question in the chat that I think you hit on partially, but I'd love to have you dive in a little bit more deeply. Patent searching usually has strategies that are reproducible via transcript of the search history, which provides detailed search language. Do you find it challenging to obtain the same reproducibility for AI search work?
Yeah, AI, as everyone has probably found, is not deterministic. We used to expect that when we interact with a machine, like a computer, that 2 + 2 always equals 4. The bits are going to flip in exactly the way that they're going to flip, and we're always going to get the same result. This is a double-edged sword that AI does not do this. There's drawbacks, but there's also benefits. You can get a fresh take. I like to think of it as if I'm asking two different people to do the same kind of patent search workflow. They might take slightly different choices. They might make slightly different assumptions. Here in this tool, those assumptions are pretty transparent. You can see exactly what it did. You can view the transcript. And if you have some preferences about how it might search, which databases you would like it to use, which search index features you would like it to use, you can express those and you can guide it. So the more specificity you put into how you would like the search to be executed and context around what it is you're trying to achieve, the more you can control and guide it, but you can also change those instructions to get a different take on the same problem. So I would frame it as mostly an advantage that the AI is not going to do the same thing every time you ask. But you should definitely be aware of that.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. I'll ask the rest of our panelists to come on video as well so that we can continue with our Q&A session here. Question here, thanks to all of you who've been dropping questions in the chat, and please keep them coming. We'll get to as many as we can. Question for Matt, although I think this is a great Matt and Brian together question. CAS has been doing an excellent job for many years uncovering hidden information in patent documents through expert indexing. What value could AI add to chemical patent searching that involves chemical substances and structures? And I'll also include a separate question there, which is, can we use Newton for structure search?
I can maybe address the first part, and then Brian, you can speak a little bit about some of the work that might be coming in the future. But I'll double down maybe on the last question on this one, Andrea. That what I like, what Brian showed about Newton, and the question that we had from the audience was, not the idea that we have an agent that is not deterministic, right? But we have a system which many of us use, which is STN, which is very rigid. And it almost goes to Brian's first slide, which is the Venn diagram, or one of the first ones, the Venn diagram of where CS sees AI fitting in intellectual property searching is not a separate component of the intellectual property search, but combined with both quality data, the indexing, and the searcher as a partner, right? So, you know, I foresee, at least in the work that my team does and where I see our organization going and others, but particularly with chemistry searching, is an agent that will assist the specialist, the scientist, do their job better rather than replacing. So we hear all the time in the market about AI displacing or de-skilling workers, right? That may be true in some domains, but in this work, I think it's quite the opposite. I think I see AI when it combines in the middle of this Venn diagram. Perfect that you had that, Brian. Making them better, right? While still maintaining that reproducibility, that the science of what is done, to be able to say someone skilled in the art can come back tomorrow or a year from now and execute the exact same search and find the exact same results with the information present. I think that is a perfect blend of a non-deterministic and a deterministic, right? The two being combined. So, Brian, I don't know your thoughts, but I see future chemistry being the same, assisting the searcher in seeing things that are not there, not questioning their judgment, adding to the options that are presented.
Yeah, I think I touched on the determinism a little bit already, so I want to touch on the chemical aspect of the question. The product is in very active development, and if you've experienced it, you may be aware that presently structure search is not there. Nevertheless, presently it is able to act on chemical indexing. So, for example, I have some substance or a group of substances. I know what they are. I'm interested to see where they're used in pharmaceutical formulations, right? And the AI is able to very dynamically use indexing features compared to the way an expert searcher would use those. So, typically you might have to do some thesaurus work. You might have to look something up. You might have to say, what's the right term to use here? What's the right CPC code? So the agent is very fluent at using these role codes, for example, on CA+ with substances. Trying different strategies for substance search across multiple databases is something you can very easily do. Like, hey, I usually do my substance search this way, but what are some other features of some other databases that might be helpful here? So that kind of strategy works today. Very soon, you will be able to draw and provide structures to the agent yourself to say, hey, here's a Marcuse structure, or here's a substance. I want to find similar things. And the agent will be able to work with that. And then not too long after that, later this year, we will have the ability for the agent to actually express structures itself, saying, okay, I've provided you some general description or maybe the claim of a patent, and I want to work with a Marcuse or some other more flexible search structure, and I don't really want to have to bother withdrawing it. I want to let the agent do that. So that is a soon-to-be-released feature.
That's great. Thanks so much, Matt and Brian. And a few other questions are coming through in this area as well. One more specific Newton feature question. Does Newton know how to deal with claim language? Like claim 9 refers to claim 3, which refers to claim 1?
Absolutely. Yes. So it can, if you can do it in STN via the terminal language, it can do that. I think the caveats that I would add to that are what I just mentioned, that we have some flexibility and sophistication of substance search that is coming very soon. And then some of the more complex workflows, maybe related to bioactivity and sequences, are also coming soon with greater fluency. But for the most part, I would say the typical indexing, claim referencing, viewing abstracts, bibliographic information, claims, even full text, it's quite fluent in those.
Yeah, that's great. And what about MARPAT?
MARPAT gets into that structure and flexibility of structure searching, which is a soon-to-be released feature. I don't know that I can give you a release date, but I expect within 1 to 3 months for the various structure support features that we've been discussing.
That's great. Exciting to see us progressing along that roadmap. One more question in this family, and then we'll jump over to some things related to the analysis that Kavita presented. Please talk about using AI search for looking for a needle in a haystack. Usually for FDO, we're looking for something really specific, not a broad set of documents.
Yeah, I could maybe start, and maybe Brian, then you have some thoughts too. I think anytime anyone says, I'm looking for something very specific and not a broad search, we always think like, well, the broadening of search is what we do, right? That is suggesting alternative angles of how something could be described, right? Again, this is where agents in general in Newton, with the confines of what STN is very good at assisting the professional to think outside the box. It's no different than if you had two peers sitting over your shoulder, like, did you try this or did you try that? As you know, one of our searchers in our team, Scott Siegel, says, like, patents are meant to be obscured, right? There's obfuscation of trying to hide information within them. So to find that needle in the haystack, agents that can think differently than you, they can suggest alternative classification codes, keywords, even indexing that you don't normally use or databases you don't use. If it's available, at least how Newton works in STN, it understands the system of content that's present, which is some of the greatest challenges users have to learning how to navigate it. We've become very good with the things we have. Suggesting alternative angles and then letting the user assist and review what was done is probably one of the strongest ways. It's what excited me when I first saw the development versions of of our agent. And Brian, I think at least I know how you've presented it to me, that Newton is a partner to try to help find those alternatives, to find that needle, as we say, that might be out there.
Yeah, I'll try and give a little bit more of a concrete example, but definitely agree. You know, if you're very familiar and comfortable with one of the many files or databases that are available in STN. Well, the different files have different fields with different sort of asterisks on them. So many of the files have patent assignee information, but patents can transfer in ownership, and the entity has some maybe different hierarchy of relationships to other entities. Oh, this company is a subsidiary of that company. It was sold to this other company. And different files represent this differently. Some files attempt to update the owner as they change. Some files have better representation of corporate hierarchies. So if you're using a file and you're kind of looking for an assignee related needle in your haystack, potentially, ask Newton, so what are some other strategies that we can use for assignee here? It's quite fluent in that. It's a very good use case for a multi-database strategy, because the databases literally represent assignees differently. And there are reasons that and there's not one that's the best. It really does depend on your use case. And that's the kind of thing where you should explore the features of the database that you may not be familiar with, because Newton can help you understand them better and use them as alternative approaches to finding whatever it is you're trying to find.
That's a great example, Brian. Between company name, assignee, corporate source, searchers are used to having to go into proprietary thesauri, look for terms, put them in that database, and then extracting them for use in other databases is a kind of a manual process. And yeah, Newton understands ultimate owner to original assignee and is able to develop queries off that. So again, assisting the user is a key part of it. It's not replacing anything that the user can do.
I love that. I love hearing especially how that really hard needle in a haystack search, you may be able to be even more effective by using an AI assisted strategy by virtue of the context and knowledge that the AI assistant has. That's really exciting. So Kavita, is it correct that the majority of the 7.6 million substances and the patents in your research were prophetics without experimental properties? How might the use of such prophetics in that trend analysis impact the trends you identified, if at all?
So that's actually incorrect, because as part of the search strategy, we narrowed down the patents by CAS index rules, which included therapeutic, pharmacological, pharmacokinetic, which means that the fraction of prophetic compounds is likely small.
Got it. Okay. And how about medical device companies? How do they contribute to the patent pool you analyzed, especially sensors and devices? And would the searches work in a similar way?
So we did use DGN, which is diagnostic use, as one of the filters to get the patents. But what we found in our analysis was that it was a very small fraction of, recent pharmaceutical patents were to do with these kind of devices and sensors.
And why do portfolio compositions for some of the companies add up to more than 100%?
That's because a particular patent could claim multiple therapeutic modalities. So that's why likely it's more than 100%. Yeah.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Let's jump back over to some of the AI related questions. I'm curious, there's a question that gets a little bit technical here in the chat. General purpose AIs are starting to get connected to good patent sources through MCP protocols that enable integration of third-party data sources to those general purpose AIs. What would that change the value of general purpose AIs for patent searching? And if so, how? And how might you get benefit out of that type of approach versus the approach that we've outlined here related to Newton and the side-by-side agent that CAS is using?
Yes, that's a very powerful approach and one that we have recognized and have a new product offering called CAS Connections, which is also evolving in its support capabilities for various search mechanisms and tools that are available there. But that's offering, as Andrea described, these MCPs. So if you're not familiar with this is kind of a way for your agent to directly interact with some remote service. So instead of going to stn.org or whatever other kind of web destination you might expect to go to search for patent or technical information, you go to your organizational AI service. Maybe you have the Microsoft Copilot or ChatGPT or Claude or any of those, and you have some kind of connector system there that you may not necessarily have direct perception of, but it allows those agents to reach out to these resources. And in fact, it can be incredibly powerful because you're now combining the all this data foundation and indexing and tools that are available with your organizational systems and data. So you can have contextually available files and information. The AI has tools to go look at your local file system potentially, or things on your SharePoint. Say, here's something, and I have a technical question about this. Let me go call Connections and see if there's literature available about such a topic. So it is an incredibly powerful way to do things. And you can even, through those MCPs, you can actually have not just the agent, go do a SciFinder search or go do a whatever search, but to also call another agent. Let me call SciFinder Newton. I could pick up these tools, but Newton has maybe greater fluency with its ability to intersect with these data, and I don't want to rely on my own agent's abilities to fully use this tool suite. So I can actually just delegate that out to another remote agent to run that kind of search for me. So absolutely a powerful approach and one that we are supporting.
That's really exciting, Brian. And we talked about the complexities of language and representation. How does that interplay with the MCP integration approach?
Yes, good question. That is where it can get quite tricky, because if you go to use IP Finder Newton or SciFinder Newton, those are agents that have this very careful context engineering that we've done to make sure that they are effective and fluent. And of course, we are evaluating and measuring, how good is SciFinder at fulfilling user search? How good is Newton, IP Finder Newton at fulfilling user search? In this MCP space, obviously, we cannot do that, right? Those are not our agents anymore. Those are your agents using our tools. And we want to make sure that those tools can be used as effectively as possible. But we don't know what other tools you have attached to your agent. So you kind of have a quality guarantee of a sort if you elect to use Newton directly via our interfaces versus using it through this other approach. So there are pros and cons of doing this either way.
Great. Sounds like there's trade-offs in both directions. We're almost at time here, but I want to ask one quick panelist question to each of you. What excites you most about this area? Kavita, why don't you go first?
Sure. With the advent of AI, definitely, all the analysis have become quicker, and it's a really useful tool to help us dig deeper into all of what we are searching for. So that's what excites me the most. How do we use it to the best of our abilities while also keeping our SME knowledge in place?
Love it. Brian?
I have different angles on this. Obviously, I got into AI through IP search in its early days and document analysis. It is the scale of IP was really what got me into AI in the first place. Was that I had too many patents in my role to handle on a monthly basis, in addition to all the other efforts that I had. So the scalability, and that I can sort of transfer. I can say, hey, here's how I think about this problem. Here's the expertise that I have, and you're going to find documents that say other stuff, but I want to be able to magnify the way that I think about the problem. And that's something that AI really allows you to do. You can say, here's how you should think about it. Here's how I think about it. Here's some idiosyncrasies that I expect you'll encounter in the literature.
That's great. Matt, how about you?
Yeah, kind of like along Brian's lines, to make the specialist more efficient, right? It is a to Kavita, subject matter experts. All of us have spent our time in science. All the members of my team love what they do, but we need tools that make us more efficient in the areas that are painful. So to Brian's point, it's about the volume of information, right? Trying to get through it. For others, I know some of the people that were on the question and answer, it's about post-processing and reporting and getting a proper work product that when we give it to someone else, they say that you've increased the value of it, right? I think it's the operational efficiencies for everyone's work. At CSIP Services, we're looking at tools that make us better at what we do and allow us to spend the expertise we have, that subject matter expertise, in the area it matters most. And any agent that can sit on our shoulder and give us an alternative idea can help us be more efficient, but not obscure what we're doing. To one of the questions that was given, is what's exciting. I don't know where we'll be 6 months from now. I have no idea, but seeing the partnership that we have in some of the tools that we use, particularly in IP Finder, STN, it's come a long way just in a very short time. So
That's wonderful. Thanks to all three of you for your contributions today, and thanks to everyone for being here with us for this webinar.